Hello, everyone. This is Crypto Bit Law, here with another blockchain legal brief. And today, we're going to discuss a recent class action lawsuit that was filed against Solana Labs out in California. But before we dive in, please, if you like the content, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And with that said, let's dive right on in. Alright, now as we can see here, Crypto News reports new class action lawsuit targets Solana in California. And here's Anatoly, the CEO of Solana Labs, in case you didn't know. They say Solana Labs, the entity behind the Solana, or Sol token blockchain, has found itself targeted by a new class action lawsuit filed with a California court. The suit accuses the company, along with a number of related persons and entities active within the ecosystem, of drawing illegal profits from the blockchain's native token, and claims that Sol is an unregistered security. Quote, defendants made enormous profits through the sale of Sol securities to retail investors in the United States, in violation of the registration provisions of federal and state securities laws, and the investors have suffered enormous losses, according to the lawsuit initiated by California resident Mark Young. Young claims he bought an undisclosed amount of Sol in August and September of 2021. The suit states that during the class period, which began on March 24th of 2020, the defendants, who include Anatoly Yakovenko, the CEO of Solana Labs, made deliberately misleading statements in relation to the total circulating supply of Sol. Quote, since April 2020, funded by the proceeds they made through their initial coin offering, defendants have spent vast sums of money promoting Sol securities throughout the United States. As a result of these promotional efforts, Sol securities reached a peak price of $258 per token, with a market capitalization of more than $77 billion on November 5th of 2021, according to the court documents. Quote, these promotional efforts took Sol securities from a relatively obscure crypto asset to one of the top crypto assets in the world. The plaintiff requests a jury trial in California seeking damages and a declaration that Sol is a security. Quote, not later than August 5th of 2022, which is 60 days from the date of publication of this notice, any member of the proposed class that is identified in plaintiff's complaint may move the court to serve as lead plaintiff through counsel of their choice. Schneider Wallace, one of the two law firms which are representing the plaintiffs, said in a statement. Solana Labs declined to comment when contacted by Crypto News. At 11:21 UTC, Sol ranked 9th by market capitalization on CoinGecko and trades at around $37, and it's up about 3% in a day. Sol is almost down 13% in a month and up 8% in a year. It's also down 86% from its all-time high of around $260 reached in November of 2021. All right, so here's the docket in this case. We could see the case name is Young versus Solana Labs Incorporated, and it's out of the District Court of Northern District of California. So this is in federal court in the Northern District. I'm guessing it has something to do with the Bay Area or somewhere around there. We could see sued in here. We could find that out in the complaint, but as we see here, it's FalconX LLC, Multicoin Capital. I knew that they were one of the big pushers behind Solana in their early days. Anatoly, the Solana Foundation, and as an interesting side note, I'm pretty sure Chamath Palihapitiya and I think David Sachs were invested in Multicoin, and so they were definitely dumping Sol on people after really seeing their bags skyrocket late last year. And not much has really happened in this case. You know, it was filed on the 1st of July of 2022. It was assigned to Judge James Donato. There were proposed summons issued, I guess an ECF filing error. And then after summons were issued, there were a bunch of motions and orders to appear pro hoc vice by the various attorneys involved in this case. So now that we've reviewed the docket, let's take a look at the complaint. So before we go on, I just wanted to take a look and see what this FalconX LLC is. Apparently it's a financial services corporation that serves as a digital asset trading platform that provides clients fast, secure, and reliable execution using data science data science, to eliminate slippage and hidden fees. I guess they partnered with investors including Fidelity, Tiger Global, Coinbase, Flybridge, Lightspeed Venture, and others. Here's some of the prominent employees: John Kaplan, Jeffrey Busgang. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's the skinny on FalconX. So let's turn now to the complaint. All right, so here's the complaint. As we could see, it's Young versus Solana Labs, and the named defendants, as we've gone over before. There's a jury trial demanded. It's a class action, as we already know. Table of contents, we've got all the basic stuff under the factual allegations. We have the genesis and the public offering. That should be interesting. The causes of action. So I guess we'll go through some of the... we've already gone through in our previous videos the importance of naming the proper parties, the importance of alleging proper jurisdiction and venue for the case, and how if you don't get those three things right, parties, jurisdiction, and venue, those are pretty much the three keys to have a properly filed lawsuit. And if you don't have any of those things correct, or if one of them's incorrect, rather, the court will kick your case right out on a motion of the defendants, right? And so those are the prerequisites to filing and actually getting your case through the door. So let's start off with the factual allegations. Let's scroll down to... Well, there's some interesting information in the introduction. It says Yakovenko founded Solana Labs in 2017. It created Solana, which is a blockchain network upon which decentralized applications, or dApps, are built. Such decentralized apps include the development of non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and decentralized finance applications. In 2021, there was a significant increase of NFTs that were minted on the Solana blockchain. It takes its Solana, I didn't know this, it takes its name from Solana Beach, a California beach where Yakovenko, Fitzgerald, and Acridge, two other Californians, created the companies that were the precursor to Solana after having worked together at San Diego's Qualcomm. Solana Labs held its first public sale of SOL tokens in a, quote, Dutch auction held in March of 2020, which was tantamount to an initial coin offering, or ICO. Okay, I'd like to learn more about this Dutch auction. SOL securities began publicly trading in March and April of 2020 and have been offered on exchanges based in the United States since then. Since April of 2020, funded by the proceeds they made through their ICO, the defendants have spent vast sums of money promoting SOL securities in the United States. As a result, they say, I guess the price skyrocketed. During the class period, defendants made deliberately misleading statements concerning the total circulating supply of SOL securities. For example, on April 28th of 2020, Yakovenko published a written statement noting that the oversupply of tokens was the result of the Solana Foundation agreeing to lend a market maker 11.3 million tokens for a 6-month period. Yakovenko admitted, quote, Solana did not disclose this information to the public, as well as the size and nature of the loan during the CoinList auction and subsequent Binance listing. Yakovenko further stated that, quote, we plan to reduce the circulating supply by removing the 11.3 million supply from the market within the next 30 days. After removing the supply, we aim to burn the tokens. This did not happen. Instead, Solana only recalled about 3.3 million tokens, and the rest hit the market. So, I remember hearing about that. That's pretty shady, and that's one of the things that kind of struck me as odd about this project. Just out of nowhere, the Solana Foundation just comes around. It's like, surprise everybody, you thought the circulating supply was this? Well, we're just going to dump 11.3 million tokens on your head. And then claim that we're going to burn them after the fact, and then never really do that. We're only going to burn about 3.3 million. It's kind of like what the Fed's doing right now with the QE. We have QE inflating the balance sheet to about 10 trillion. They claim they're going to draw down on the balance sheet with quantitative tightening. And in reality, they're only, really reducing the balance sheet by, tens of millions, if not maybe hundreds of millions of dollars compared to the 10 trillion they put up on the balance sheet. But that's an aside. It continues, the value of SOL securities has been tied to the perceived strength and reliability of its underlying blockchain. Indeed, Solana made such representations to the public regarding the purported strength and reliability of its blockchain network. Solana's website asserts that SOL is a, quote, decentralized and unstoppable blockchain. unstoppable. This thing goes down like once a month. The more decentralized a blockchain is, the less it relies on a central point of control. Yakovenko previously represented decentralization as desirable. This is interesting. Contrary to Defendants' public representations, however, Sol is not decentralized because company insiders hold a substantial percentage of them. As of May of 2021, insiders held 48% of the Sol supply. The network is thus highly centralized. Solana's blockchain network is also prone to devastating outages. I knew this was going to come up. For example, in December of 2020, the network was out for 5 hours. In 2021, it was out for 18. Later, it had to restart. It experienced 12 outages since 2022, with the June 1st, 2022 outage causing a 12% dip in the value of the securities. I like how they've got this whole like NLP in there. They just kind of keep calling it securities. It's like when I was a prosecutor, I would just kind of name the defendant once in the beginning and then try to NLP or just kind of pull Jedi mind tricks on the reader. Instead of giving the defendant a name, I would just call them defendant. And so in a sense, it kind of strips away their humanity and you stop looking at this person as a person and more like just an entity or an object as defendant. Same thing here. They're trying to program the reader. Instead of calling it a token or anything like that, they're like, it's a security, it's a security, it's a security. And the goal with that, it's clever wordplay and clever wordsmithing by the author of this complaint. And I did the same tricks and tactics when I was writing my pleadings for courts. If you can program the reader to think in the way that you want them to think, that's ultimately how you eventually convince and get people over to your side and craft a convincing argument. Solana blockchain it's prone to network congestion. Multicoin Capital Management and Kyle Samani, collectively the Multicoin defendants, relentlessly promoted Sol securities after purchasing them for 40 cents in 2019 when Multicoin led Solana's Series A offering. Samani and Multicoin continuously flogged Sol securities, inflating its market price from below $1 to hundreds of dollars, persisting in their promotional efforts even after it was clear that Solana had serious outages and issues. The Multicoin defendants offloaded millions of dollars of Sol securities on retail investors, such as plaintiff, and profited handsomely from their promotion of unregistered Sol securities. So we can link Chamath Palihapitiya and Sachs into this because they were some of the people, the investors that were actually funding Multicoin. And I love those dudes. They've got a great pod, but to think that they're not dumping on your head as a retail investor is just, I don't know what world you're living in if you think that they're not dumping on your head, right? So they go into the parties. Of course, Solana Labs is a Delaware corporation. As we know, or as we've gone over before, a lot of companies that operate out of the United States are headquartered in Delaware. That's because Delaware is one of the most favorable jurisdictions to corporate entities. They go out of, I think, the Delaware Court of Chancery. And so if you've been following the Elon Musk thing recently with his lawsuit with Twitter, Twitter's based out of Delaware, and they're going to sue him in Delaware court, in the Court of Chancery. As most of this big business, high M&A sort of style thing operates. It's interesting, Defendants Solana Foundation's a nonprofit having a principal place of business in Zug, Switzerland. Okay, so that's an interesting place to choose it. The Solana Foundation develops core nodes on the blockchain network. The Solana Foundation also chooses validators for the Solana blockchain. Jurisdiction and venue, and then we get to the factual allegations. Okay, they go over what Bitcoin is, why it was important. Proof of work, proof of stake, validation, things that we already know, crypto assets, it boomed, Ethereum, it boomed, smart contracts, they go over that, Sol's genesis and public offerings. Okay, let's go over this. Alright, so Sol's genesis and public offerings. Solana Labs claim that the inspiration for Solana came from witnessing scalability issues related to other blockchain systems such as Bitcoin, which processed a paltry 4.6 transactions per second as recent as 2019. Indeed, commentators note that, quote, the battle for a scalable solution is the blockchain's moon race. Whereas Bitcoin has struggled to scale beyond 15 transactions per second, Anatoly claimed that the Solana blockchain could process hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. For comparison, Visa processes 1,700 transactions per second. Yakovenko turned to his colleague from Qualcomm, Greg Fitzgerald, to revamp the code base of what would become Solana. The goal was to weave all the world's transactions together on a single, scalable blockchain. To fund its creation, Yakovenko, through Solana Labs, raised private funding in multiple rounds. It raised funds by selling SOL securities. SOL is a crypto asset that is created and minted on Solana, the Solana Labs blockchain network. In April of 2018's seed sale, Solana Labs sold the future rights to 79.2 million SOL securities, about 15% of the initial supply, for the equivalent of $3.17 million at a rate of about 4 cents per token. On May 21st of 2018, Solana Labs filed a Form D, Notice of Exempt Offering of Securities, with the SEC in connection with the seed sale, indicating sale of securities exempt from registration under Rule 506C. An amended Form D was later filed in August of 2018. In a June 2018, quote, founding sale, Solana Labs then sold 63.1 million tokens, about 12% of the initial supply, for the equivalent of $12.6 million, about 20 cents a token. Multicoin was the lead investor in this round, which also saw participation from Distributed Global, Block Tower Capital Foundation, Blockchain VC, Slow Ventures, Neo Capital, Passport Capital, and Rockaway Ventures. On June 21st of 2018, Solana Labs filed a Form D with the SEC in connection with the founding sale. Nearly all of Solana's advisors and early investors are U.S.-based companies. Multicoin's based in Austin, Texas, so on and so forth. Okay, in July 2019, the validator sale, Solana Labs sold 25.3 million SOL securities, about 5% of the initial supply, for the equivalent of $5.7 million at about 22 cents a token, to individuals and companies planning to run Solana validators. On July 31st, 2019, Solana Labs filed a Form D with the SEC in connection with the validator sale. In February 2020, strategic sales, Solana Labs sold 9.1 million SOL securities, about 1.8% of the supply, for an equivalent of $2.3 million or 25 cents a token. On March 24th of 2020, Solana first sold SOL securities publicly through a Dutch auction on the platform CoinList. In this auction, 8 million SOL securities were sold at a price of 22 cents a token. CoinList's headquarters are in San Francisco. On April 8th of 2020, Solana Labs transferred all IP related to the protocol and 167 million SOL to the Solana Foundation. This was after Solana Labs had released the SOL token through the Dutch auction in March of 2020. You can see how the plaintiffs are emphasizing that timeline right there. Solana Labs raised an additional $314 million in a private token sale announced in June of 2021. This funding round was led by Andreessen Horowitz and Polychain Capital, with participation from 1KX, Alameda Research, which is Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, Blockchain Ventures, CMS Holdings, CoinFund, CoinShares, Collab Currency, MGNR, Memetic Capital, Multicoin Capital, Parify Capital, Sino Capital Global, Jump Trading, and select individual investors like Boys Noise. I think that is some sort of like techno band or something like that. Solana Labs used proceeds from the sale to launch an incubation studio alongside the venture investing arm and trading desk dedicated to the Solana ecosystem. And so then they go over how the control is highly centralized, as we could see through how this thing was ICO'd. The outages show that it's highly centralized. I bet that's a pretty decent read if you want to learn more in depth about, I guess, how the validators. Let's see, it just goes over how it's plagued with problems. It had 12 serious outages recently. Oh, this is good. On September 14, 2021, the Solana blockchain suffered a significant outage and saw transactions on the network halted for several hours. To address this issue, defendants and their engineers unilaterally shut down the entire Solana blockchain off for hours to address this issue. Interesting. Okay. Defendants sold and solicited the sale of Solana securities. Okay. Got that. The circulating supply and the Solana supply. Okay, the term unlocked references Solana securities that are not subject to alienability restrictions and thus can be freely sold. SOL securities can accordingly be divided into three categories which comprise the, quote, total supply as follows. Circulating supply. Those are SOL securities that are part of the, quote, circulating supply. These securities are not owned by Solana. In other words, they are in accounts outside of the control of the Solana Foundation or Solana Labs, and they be freely sold. Solana supply. These are sold securities that are neither locked nor part of the circulating supply. These securities are owned or controlled by Solana and may be freely sold. Once they are sold to the public, they become part of the circulating supply, the locked supply. Sold securities that are locked and thus may not be freely sold. As explained below, Solana's team members and founders held, quote, locked sold securities, which were gradually unlocked and thus became part of the Solana supply over time. Okay. They solicited more sales. Apparently there were some tweets involved in here. You can see all these tweets. Multi-coin defendants sold securities. Well, I think that there's no doubt about that. Multi-coin's been dumping on our heads for, I guess, pretty much the entirety of this whole Solana experience. And then there's a grip more of tweets. Now they get to their argument about why it is a security, and then of course they go back to the Howey test, which, as you recall, it's a 4-part test that requires an investment of funds into a common pool with the expectation of profit to be derived from the work of others, right? And you can see that standard's laid out right here by the Howey case that was decided by the Supreme Court. We've been over this many times before, and so they're applying the Howey test to Solana and the Sol security, as they claim, and the plaintiffs are arguing that it is a security based on the Howey test. Sol investors invested money. Sol investors participated in a common enterprise. Okay, let's go through this along with them. All right, so part 1, an investment of money. There's no doubt that the people that invested in Sol invested money to get it. I think that that's a given, right? First prong is a satisfied offer and a sale of a digital asset. Okay, it's purchased or otherwise acquired in exchange for value, which is in the form of real or fiat currency. All right, I think we can all agree we have that. Sol investors participated in a common enterprise. All right, so the SEC framework states that in evaluating digital assets, we found that a common enterprise typically exists. The SEC framework also elaborates, based on our experiences to date, investments in digital assets have constituted investments in a common enterprise because the fortunes of digital asset purchasers have been linked to each other or to the success of the promoters' efforts. I mean, seems pretty reasonable, and okay. Sol investors purchase Sol with a reasonable expectation of profit. All right. I mean, this one should be self-explanatory. Let's not beat around the bush. You put money into a crypto or a digital asset because you think number go up. You're not buying this thing with the intention of losing money on it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't buy it. You wouldn't buy it with the intention of having this thing crab and trade sideways forever. You buy it, unless you're crazy, with the intention of it to go up, right? So I think that's pretty. We don't have to go into all that. I mean, that's a long-winded explanation. Okay, and here's part D. The success of Sol requires efforts of Solana Labs and others. I think that's. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward to me. I mean, we're not going to get paid. Our bags aren't going to pump in Sol unless Solana Labs, figures out the crap that's going on in their blockchain and stops it from going down, right? So, I mean, I guess that in part is the expectation of profit from the work of others. Plaintiff and other class members have suffered damages. The Sol securities today are worth far less than the price the class members paid for them. Okay. Then we have class allegations, and that's a bunch of, legal jargon and procedural, rules and analysis that you have to do in order to actually get certified as a class. All right, now we get into the juicy stuff, the causes of action. And so we have the first one, which is, surprise, surprise, a violation of the Securities Act. So violations of Section 5 and 12A1 of the Securities Act against the defendants, right? So we've been through this before in another lawsuit. I forget exactly which one it was. It was another class action lawsuit where the plaintiffs alleged the same thing, violations of the Securities Act, and the court can determine that you would be entitled to damages if a defendant violated this. I'm pretty sure, since they're in California, I haven't read this complaint yet, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a California business code claim in here, unfair business practices, maybe either unjust enrichment or fraud, something like that. So we're going to have a few securities things I'm foreseeing. Unfair business practices, maybe fraud, unjust enrichment, that sort of thing. So we have the Securities Act violation right here. And so we know that if they're held to be in violation of that, they can seek damages with respect to the SOL tokens, okay? Another violation of the Securities Act, this one's particularly Section 15, controlling persons, and okay, so just more nitty-gritty of the Securities Act. California Corporations Code, what did I say? Okay. So a violation of that in state law. I am literally shocked there's only 3 causes of action in here, but we got one from the California business law, and then 2 from the Securities Act. So, oh, okay, on. Then our prayer for relief, they want a jury trial and any injunctive or other equitable relief as the court may deem just and proper. And so that's just pretty much the catch-all. Anything you think we can get, we want it, right? And then the certification and transactions. Here's a transaction list. So. All right, so that pretty much wraps up a just general brief overview of this complaint against Solana Labs and some of the investors, the early seed round investors, Anatoly, just the main defendants named in this complaint. It's just interesting to see how this is just another suit in a series of suits that have gone after similar causes of action, namely class action suits against these foundations, corporate entities, individual developers, and sometimes seed investors for violations of securities acts and unfair business practices. And I don't think that this is going to stop anytime soon. I'd like to know what your thoughts are, whether or not you think Solana is a security based on those 4 parts of the Howey test we went over. Remember, it's an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profit to be derived from the work of others, right? And in my opinion, based on what we have here, I personally opine or believe that Solana, it was an ICO. This seems like it is a security to me. But that's the beautiful thing about the law. I mean, not everything is so cut and dry. And you better believe that they're going to have some high-priced defense attorneys out here trying to spin it to win it in order to try to convince the court that either this thing is not a security, they did not violate the California unfair business practices laws, or probably even more so, what they're going to try to do is get this thing kicked out on a procedural basis, or try to get the plaintiffs to settle this thing. Because clearly, they've got billions of dollars probably in war chest in between these defendants. So there's a lot of money there that could be paid to make this thing go away, and pretty much moot it out from here on. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Solana was a security? Is it a security? Was there an ICO? What do you think? I'd like to know. But with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I certainly enjoyed making it for you and learning more about this along with you guys that chose to watch the video. If you did enjoy it, please give the content a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate that. We're almost to 1,000 subs, and so it's been a wild journey these past few months, but we love being here, we love making these videos, so hopefully you'll keep riding along with us as we continue to learn more and discuss more about what's going on with respect to laws and regulations in the crypto, digital asset, Web3 industry and space. So give us a sub, like, follow, all that good noise. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video.